Hey Vishal,
Hey Karthik, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
All right. So today we find ourselves in the cell. Why don't you tell us a little bit about this environment?
Oh sure, so this is the Cognitive Environments Laboratory.
Right.
We call this cell, it's actually a smart room that helps you design and use a lot of, make use of a lot of sensors in the room. A lot of sensors, actuators, as you can see that we have microphones, cameras.
Right, all around. Yeah.
And we are actually using some projects to try to make utilize of this smart room.
Okay, so today I want to talk to you about the Mr.Jones interface. So this is the interface that you see here behind you on the screen. So the idea with the Mr.Jones interface is that we're going to use some of those sensors that you were just talking about in the smart space. We're going to use some of the continuous input from those sensors, take it down to more of a symbolic level so that we can reason about some of those inputs, right?
Certainly.
And then basically use the system, use some of these inputs for the system to figure out what is going on in the room, okay? So if you look at this, this is basically a representation of the Mr.Jones interface, okay? So let's call this the mind of the agent, the mind of Celia, okay? And it's basically made up of 5 main components.
Sure.
So over here on the bottom left, you will see something that says what I see. So this is a combination of 4 different visual camera feeds.
Okay.
So these are the visual sensors that are there in the room.
Okay.
And so the agent is able to identify, number 1, how many people there are in the room at any given time. And it also passes this through a recognition service. So if some of those people are identified, for example, it's picked up Biplav in this case, it's able to actually assign a label to that person. So say that this person is over here in the room and so on, okay? So these 2 components basically are the agent's representation of what it sees. The other component over here is the agent's representation of what it hears. So this is a transcript, and so the agent is basically summarizing our conversation over the past few minutes, right? So it basically picks up the important words that we've been talking about, and it tries to map some of those words to some of the use cases that may be going on in this room. Okay? And so the whole idea of picking up these sensors and using them is to basically figure out how much confidence the agent has in particular scenarios, okay? So here you basically see a bar chart as well as a word cloud representation.
So are these all the projects that it could pick things
Right, so in this case we've basically pre-fed some of the projects or some of the use cases that have already been worked on in the cell, right? So for example, MAA is mergers and acquisitions. It's a business, it's an enterprise use case. Water is another use case that we've been working on to do with clean water and sensors and so on. So basically the idea is if you have a smart space, which is a multi-purpose smart space and which can be used for many different projects or many different use cases, what you want to do is you want to feed in those use cases, and then you want to use all of this information coming in from the sensors, from the transcript, from the video sensors and so on, and also where people are situated, what they're saying, what they're doing in the room. You want to use all of that information for the smart agent to basically figure out what kind of scenario is going on. So for example, if you look at this particular chart over here, the agent has a lot of confidence in this being a meeting right now. And the reason that it has that is because there are a number of people. As you can see, it sees a number of agents in the room. I think it sees about 5 people in the room right now. So it has a high confidence this might be a meeting of some sort.
Well, it does make sense because we're not talking anything in particular with any of the projects. We just have a lot of people are here and we're just talking about this
and this makes sense because once the agent zeroes in with a lot of confidence on a particular scenario, then it can start orchestrating things that might be useful for that scenario without being explicitly tasked to do it. So if the agent thinks that this is a meeting, it can start recording the minutes of the meeting. It can start transcribing things. It can start taking visual summaries of the meeting so that ultimately you could put it all together in a nice little package and send it off to somebody who missed the meeting. So you could use it as a summary of the meeting and so on. So anyways, this was just, I wanted to demonstrate some of the functionalities we have of Mr.Jones right now, as well as the interface. And hopefully we'll be able to extend this further in the coming days.
Do you mind if we test the capabilities of mergers and acquisitions?
Oh no, sure, go ahead.
I can try to come up with a scenario for acquisitions that we generally talk about. What we generally do is we talk about what we have people coming in, and what we talk about in that is there's a company that is trying to acquire a new company, and in this scenario, the company is looking at various aspects, which would be financial reports, stocks, and other information. And what they generally do then is they look at, they have a company in mind, and they want to make sure that they can, if they can find something that is very similar to the other companies, it would be very useful. So I can imagine that, you know, people are, let's say that IBM is looking to acquire XYZ and in a particular domain, and if they're trying to, I can see the M&A.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So
the confidence of the M&A.
Right. So I think this has something to do with what the system hears. So as you start talking about keywords that are associated with a particular scenario, we actually have a model in the back end in the Watson conversation. So if you start talking about a specific scenario in particular, it'll actually increase its confidence. So here you can see that instead of believing in meeting with a high confidence, it now has pushed up some of the confidence of the mergers and acquisition scenario as well. So that's essentially the idea of the system, that it evolves over time based on the conversations that are going on in the room, based on who is in the room, and what kinds of actions they're taking, and so on. So
I think this will be a very useful tool, especially if you have to prepare things ahead of time.
Right.
This could be very useful. Well, thank you.
Well, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.